Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
So after being done with Aztecs and the Mayans, we now come to Incas of Peru, who were also an important culture and an important kingdom in Central America during the medieval period. So the largest of the indigenous civilization in South America was that of Incas in Peru. So it has the distinction of being the largest of the indigenous or the native civilization in South America, and they are called the Incas of Peru. In the 12th century, the first Inca, Manco Capac, established his capital at Cusco. So the first Inca, his name is Manco Capac, established the first capital of the Incas at Cusco. And expansion began under the 9th Inca. So the Inca is the chief of this civilization. They are termed as Inca. And the 9th Inca began the extension of Inca Empire, and it stretched up to 3,000 miles and consisted of the coast of Peru. So the geographical region, that is the coast of Peru, and most of the highlands of Ecuador, northern Chile, part of western Bolivia, and part of northwestern Argentina, extending over 4,000 kilometers. So this is the geographical extension of the empire of Incas. So we saw the first Inca, the first chief, established the capital at Cusco, and it is under the 9th Inca that this whole region gets expanded, with the coast of Peru, highlands of Ecuador, northern Chile, and part of western Bolivia are all now included under the kingdom of Incas, and it now extends up to 4,000 kilometers in area during this period. And the Inca emperors were known by various titles including Sapa Inca, Capic Apu. Often an emperor was simply referred as Inca. So that is what is interesting. An emperor, although he had various titles, an emperor was referred to as Inca. So it meant a chief or a king of the civilization or the kingdom. And the empire was highly centralized, as the king being the highest authority of the state. So another important feature is it is a centralized structure. That is, king has the absolute power. So you have absolute or very powerful king at the top of the structure. And below the Inca, that is the king, was the royal family, which consisted of Inca's immediate family, concubines, and all his children. So just beneath the king came the royal family with all kind of special privileges and powers. And the royal family was the ruling aristocracy. Along with the powers, royal family was also the noble class or the aristocratic class who were given positions of power. And each tribe had a tribal head, and each clan in each tribe had a clan head. So this kingdom, or in this structure, there were tribes beneath the nobility, and each tribe had a tribal head who decided what is good or what is to be done, and who had authority over all the other tribal members. And this each tribe was again subdivided into different clans with a clan head. And at the very bottom were common people who were grouped in squads of 10 people, each with a single head. And in the beneath or in the lower level, there were common people. And in the structure, the common people were grouped into a section of 10 people or a squad of 10 people, and each of the squad had a single head. So this is how the whole structure, the administrative unit, was divided into. The Incas used two main methods to subjugate the people of different lands. So now we see the methods used by Incas for subjugation of people whom they conquered or invaded. So the first was military conquest. So one of the first methods is the military conquest, facilitated by the large well-equipped army. Because of they having a large well-equipped army, the military conquest was the first method. The second was diplomacy, that is negotiations, in which the Incas offered the elites of the region the choice of submitting peacefully and gaining favor backed by the threat of armed conquest. So two methods, one is military conquest and the second method is diplomacy, that is through peaceful measures they were offering the aristocrats or the noble class of that region to make some compromises and accept the rule of Incas. And to consolidate their control over the people of empire, the Incas used various methods of integrating the native political and religious system into those of the empire. So in order to make sure that people remained loyal to the Incas, they integrated the native political and religious system. So they did not discard or force the people to leave all their cultural practices. Instead, they integrated or included those practices of those region also into the cultural practice of the Inca Empire. And in many parts of the empire, they implemented a highly standardized administrative system based on units of 10 known as decimal administration. Another important administrative development of the Incas was they implemented a highly administrative and standardized, that is a universal system based on units of 10 called the decimal administration. So this was something which was considered a very effective way of administering various parts of the kingdom. And the subjects of the Inca Empire were rigidly controlled. They were not allowed to travel freely. Because of the centralized system, the subjects were very rigidly controlled under this administrative structure, and they were not allowed to travel freely. Instead of giving items in tribute, they were required to give a fixed amount of their labor to the state in the form of building roads, making pottery, etc. Important is the tribute or the tax was to be given in the form of labor to the state or to the government, which was then used for building roads and pottery and large buildings of the state. Agriculture was a tough business. Incas actively set about carving up mountains into terraced farmlands. So this labor was used to carve mountains. So large mountains were carved and then made into farmlands for the purpose of agriculture. And they turned the steep mountain sides into terraced farms. So see how much hard work it required to change those or to break up those mountains and make it into farmlands. And the Incas cultivated corn and potatoes and raised llama and alpaca for food and labor. So these llama and alpaca were animals who were raised for food and labor. So they were like similar to camels. It looks similar to camel, but it's only found in these regions of South America and were used for food purpose and also for labor and transportation purpose. Of all the organized people of the America, the Incas were the most brilliant engineers. So to their credit is not only that the greatest kingdom, but it also had most brilliant engineers. Their architecture is well known for its finely worked stones, which were fitted together so well without the use of mortar that one cannot fit a knife blade between the stones. So they are called the best engineers or the brilliant engineers because whatever architecture they invested in or they made, they did not need mortar, that is a mixture, like a mixture of cement and other building material which is used for the brick. I mean for the bricks to stay together as a cementing or something which keeps the building blocks or the bricks or the stones stay together. And very interestingly, in the architecture of Incas, such a mortar was not required. Without the use of mortar or this material used for the stones to stick together, it was so efficient that it is said one cannot fit a knife blade between the stones. There was no mortar, but the stones were so close to each other that not even a knife could go through that. And the high quality Inca stonework is found in Cusco and the surrounding region in sites such as Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo. So these are places within the Inca Empire where high quality Inca stonework is found. And the Incas also constructed an extensive system of well-built and constantly maintained roads covering at least 23,000 kilometers. So it had well-planned roads and extensive system of well-built and well-planned roads. To cross the many steep rivers, they built impressive suspension bridges. So the suspension bridges were built over steep rivers. So this was also something which clearly reflected their brilliant engineering skills. And the Incas had no formal writing system, but instead had quippes, which were record-keeping devices based on a complicated system of notes. So instead of an advanced writing system, they had a record-keeping device which was called quippes, and it was based on a complicated system of notes. So certain notes were tied, and then that was how the record keeping happened. And the language they spoke was Quechua. So this Quechua was the language of Incas, and they imposed on all the people they conquered. Because of this, this language is still spoken by Native Americans. Interestingly, Incas imposed this language on all the invaded people or all those people whom they conquered. And as a result, this language is still a living language, and many of the Native Americans speak it even today. And the central god of the Incas religion was sun god. So in this civilization also, we see the sun god had great prominence, and it was the chief god of Incas and the only god that had temples built for him. So there were several temples built or dedicated to the sun god. And the sun god was the father of the royal family, and the royal family considered sun god as its father. And the Incas also believed that there is a heaven, hell, and a resurrection of the body after death. So as per the religious beliefs of Incas, they also believed in heaven, hell, and the resurrection of the body after death. The organization of the Inca Empire with its pyramid-like structure, so we already saw the pyramid with king at the head and the nobility, that is the royal family or the royalty, and then came the tribes and the clans, and then came the common people, under the tribal chiefs or the clan head. So that's why we have here again a pyramidal structure which was highly centralized structure. And it meant that if the Inca chief was captured, the chain of command could quickly come apart. So, although the centralized structure had several benefits, the demerit or the disadvantage was, once this king was captured or attacked, there was nobody to command. Nobody could take up this role because of this centralized structure. If it was a decentralized structure, everybody within this structure could have certain authority or say over things. But once the king is captured, there was nobody to command and could take a quick decision on, and the whole structure disintegrated or came apart. And this was precisely what happened when the Spaniards decided to invade their country in 1560. So this centralized structure in a pyramidal form became a disadvantage for the Incas when the Spaniards attacked them. So the cultures of Aztecs and Incas had certain features in common and were very different from European culture. So we already saw the Aztecs and Incas had several common features, and most striking is they were very different from the European culture. Society was hierarchical, but there was no private ownership of resources by few people as in Europe. Most important is no private ownership of land. Though the priests and shamans were accorded an exalted status and large temples were built in which gold was used ritually, there was no great value placed on gold or silver. So here we see the differences between these two cultures, that is European and American. First is no private property for individuals and no great value placed on gold or silver. So this becomes the second major difference. The native people of Americas did not associate a great value with gold or silver, but for Europeans these were materials of high great value. And this was also in marked contrast to the contemporary European society. So for the European society, this obsession with gold and silver as an expensive resource was there. Now we look at some of the questions. Briefly describe the life of Incas of Peru. So this again is a long question and we have already dealt with it. We saw that it is the largest indigenous civilization in South America. And in 12th century, the capital was established at Cusco. And then the 9th Inca expanded the territory up to 4,000 kilometers. And the king was simply referred to as Inca, and he also acquired several titles like Sapa, Inca, and Capic Ampu. And beneath the king, who was the supreme authority, there was the royal family, and the whole administrative structure was in a pyramidal shape. And we saw they were also greatly interested in military conquest, and they had a well-equipped army which they used to threaten people to accept their control and authority. And we saw that they used two kinds of methods to consolidate their control over newly conquered territories. One is military conquest, the use of violence, and the other diplomacy, that is through negotiations. They consolidated their control, and the labor was very important, and then the common people had to provide the state with labor services which was used for building roads and bridges, and then changing or turning the mountainous terrain into farmlands, which was the most hard task. that is turning those large mountains into farmland suitable for agriculture. For this, the labor power of the common people was employed. And we saw they were brilliant engineers who built extensive systems of roads and suspension bridges and farmlands, how that was done. And also we'll have to talk about the writing system. They did not have a formal system of writing, but it was based on a complicated system of notes that they recorded. Their record keeping devices were the notes or the system of notes, and the language was Quechua, which was imposed on those regions invaded by the Incas. And the religious practice had the sun god at its center, who was considered the father of the royal family, and they believed in heaven and hell and the resurrection of the body. But the main disadvantage was that the centralized system had the king at its top, and if the king was captured, there was nothing more they could do. And when they came into contact with the Spaniards, this was the major disadvantage which the Incas had, and this led to their failure. So this is a long question, so you'll have to include all the specific features of Incas of Peru, like the largest civilization, and the first Inca, that is the first king, the capital establishment, and the ninth Inca, what he does for expanding the territory, and then their conquest styles or the conquest of different regions, how it happens, and the two methods which were used. One is using violence, that is military conquest, and then the other was diplomacy, and then the language which was spoken, Quechua, how it was imposed on all those sections invaded by the Incas, and then the administrative structure with the king at the center and the nobility and then the common people, and how the common people were supposed to provide labor services for building up large networks of roads and bridges, and how they were brilliant engineers who converted this mountainous terrain into agricultural lands. And lastly, what was the disadvantage of the centralized system followed by the Incas? So these are the different points which you should keep in mind and expand when such a question is asked. And in which territories of South America did Incas live? So this is also something which we just now referred to. We saw by the 9th century, the Inca Empire had extended up to coast of Peru, highlands of Ecuador, northern Chile, western Bolivia, and part of northwestern Argentina. So this was the geographical region where Incas had established itself, and it's in the South American region. And comes the describe the condition of society and the system of government of the Incas. So here again, as we have already discussed in the question before, the pyramidical structure is to be described, and then how tribes and clans, how it was organized with tribal chiefs and clan head, and then a squad of 10 people which was for the military purpose, how it functioned, and the condition of society. You'll have to talk about how the common people had to give labor service to the state, which was then used for building road networks, and other farmland areas. So these are the different points which is to be mentioned under this question.